Welcome, everyone. So this is one of a series of town coffee chats that we're having. Today, joining me, I've got Deputy Mayor Andy McIntosh. We've got our town clerk, Karen Landry, and we have Sergeant Dave McLagan from the Orangeville Police Service. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out this morning. So these chats are just to give our community some background information, what's going on during our COVID-19 crisis, and both Ms. Landry and Sergeant McLagan are involved in some of the enforcement issues that are going on right now, and I thought it would be interesting just to talk about how their departments are handling everything that's going on right now. So, kick things off. I'd just like to ask Deputy McIntosh. I haven't seen you personally for quite some time. I know you're ensconced in, stately McIntosh Manor there, and dealing with the COVID crisis. So, can you give us an update on what's going on in your life, and how you've been able to connect with the community through our council meetings and such?
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, I'm living in 1,800 square feet of paradise here.
Nice.
Been here for about 4 weeks now.
Yeah.
I haven't been getting out much personally, just doing some online shopping with the grocery stores and stuff. As far as communicating, I've done a number of these chats. This technology is great, in my opinion. It works good in a situation like this. So I've been trying to keep up with things this way. We've had a couple of council meetings now. County council meeting tomorrow, another one. Hydro board meeting tomorrow. So we've been getting out there, we've been communicating with people, and the thing I'm most proud of is we've been able to carry on. Obviously not the same, but we are carrying on the business of the town. Again, obviously not the same, but we are still carrying on.
Right. Very good. So Karen, you have a department to look after, and I know you've been parceling out work. Some of your staff is working from home, and I know you've been doing some work. So can you give us an update on what's going on in your life right now?
Perfect timing, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. Thank you for having me here today. We're going to hear about 11 chimes as I speak, but in terms of coping, pardon me?
Are you at Westminster Abbey? Where are you?
It's like I am.
Yeah.
Anyway, with respect to coping with COVID-19, again, it is an adjustment, and I have to say, as far as the department's concerned, we are working from home as much as we possibly can. Of course, we're in for council meetings when it's necessary. And of course, as we move forward in terms of looking at how we can continue to move business along, particularly if we look at some of the planning applications that we might need to deal with through Committee of Adjustment, there will be further attendance required at the office to facilitate meetings. Of course, personally, again, taking advantage of the online shopping like Deputy Mayor McIntosh is doing, exercising social distancing because it is so important. And when we're at work, making sure that we're taking the necessary steps to do our best to protect everyone in terms of disinfecting, like after the use of the photocopier. Right now, as you're aware, we're working closely with the police with respect to responding to complaints for emergency orders, specifically bylaws helping out with the matters as it relates to businesses. If I just touch a bit, maybe, Mr. Mayor, just on the council meetings itself. I believe if we weren't first, we were one of the first with respect to having a meeting that was conducted through electronic participation. And kudos to IT for facilitating that. They did a fabulous job and it went very well. We have had a second meeting, which was on April 4th, and our next meeting is on April 20th. And as we continue through that process, we're going to continue to enhance our abilities in terms of incorporating not just public access, but the ability for the public to participate as if the meeting was taking place in the council chambers. So at our upcoming meeting, our next step will be to incorporate delegates participating through Teams through a phone line, and we will facilitate public question period again like we did the last meeting. It is our hope by the end of May, for our second meeting in May, that we'll be able to facilitate public question period through the utilization of Teams. And again, that's all possible due to the great work that IT is doing. And council, I have to say, I have to give a nod to council too in terms of picking up with the use of the technology so quickly and doing such a fabulous job. Not only you, Mr. Mayor, but all of the council's members being respectful and speaking and working with each other when you're doing it remotely. It's a lot easier when you're physically present in the room. So those are some of the things that we are focusing on in our division, particularly during this time. And even though we're continuing on with the operation of our businesses, like issuing licenses and also responding to inquiries, bylaw, we're responding to complaints, facilitating council meetings, and looking at how we can move forward with some other business as it relates to perhaps community of adjustment next. We are also focusing on our records and the classification and the digitization of our records. This gives us a good some time to focus on that particular project. So those are the things that we're actively working on. And I think that really sums it up at this point, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Well, that's great, Karen. I know that the community is wondering, you know, what town staff are doing. I just wanted everybody to understand that many staff members are continuing their work, whether it's in finance or administration, you know, the clerk's office. Everybody's continuing to get their work done. There's lots of things for the clerk's department to concern themselves with, including bylaw updates and you know, depending on how long this crisis continues, those issues will be tackled in due time as well. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, just on that point, I can add that those bylaws that that council has put on our work plan continue to be worked on, so that when we are at the point that we can facilitate the public input on these particular regulatory bylaws, we're ready to go.
Yeah, and you know, you just you mentioned public input there. You know, these this democracy we're in is it was predicated upon public input, right? And this is a very difficult time that we're in right now. But I know the IT department and the clerk's department have done their best to facilitate public engagement, because that's part of what we do. We have to be transparent, and to be transparent, we have to allow the public to ask questions and inquire and comment on what we're doing. So thank you for all that you're doing. So Sergeant McLagan, it's an interesting time for the police service. You know, I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say this morning, but things like a difference maybe in the type of incidents that are being reported, people being home, so maybe there's less of certain things but more of others. And you know, I'm very interested to hear how the department is coping with this. I know everybody's concerned about health and safety for frontline workers. We hear about our healthcare workers, our long-term care facility workers, and obviously the first line first responders like yourselves, and fire and paramedics, and how you're able to protect yourselves going into situations where you don't know whether that evil virus is percolating in the environment you're in. So anyway, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can talk about yourself personally, but how the department's handling all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to say thank you to all of our partners here, both provincial and municipal. You touched on it very briefly, Mr. Mayor. These are extraordinary times. The policy changes, the way we do business has just flipped, you know, a good 180 degrees, and we have come up with new processes and new ways of doing business and continuing delivering service across the board. And that's largely in part to all of us stepping into this extraordinary time. On the personal end, I almost feel, I know my family's envious. I get to leave the house. And what we've done here is every other week, our administration is, we flip. So we can work from home one week and then we're here the other week to minimize the impact. And I think it's safe to say that every part of the organization here has been touched in the way we do business, from the court end to the way we tend to call, Luckily, we have some fantastic relationships with Town Hall and the bylaw end that we just stepped that relationship up even further. And a lot of this has been figuring out, okay, the new legislation came yesterday. We've never dealt with this, and in my case, 23 years of policing. So we're learning that legislation. How do we apply it and make some good decisions? A lot of them are very quick, but knock on wood, things have gone very, very well. So on the family end, and I'll just touch on that a little bit. My wife works from home quite a bit as a consultant, so this was kind of normal for her. We had the kids, university. My oldest came home and now finishing her university semester off this way, and high schooler as well. So it's a busy house. So nevertheless, like I said, they were quite envious that I got to go back to the office this week. So and then just play safe, right? I'm glad to see the community end of it, from a grocery store to the compliance in Orangeville has been very, very high. And I'd like to think that's the same case in most of the province. People get it here, so which is great. And by that, then it makes our staff even more safe. And we try to help everybody out. So on the work end of it, as it's very rapid the first couple of weeks on a policy perspective, and it's how we deal with court. Now the courts are closed. How we deal with prisoners, and that administrative process has really had an impact on the back, and the average citizen won't normally see, but that's taken up quite a bit of our time. The service delivery to a call. So you're right, Mr. Mayor, you hit it right on the head when you said the calls have changed significantly. So we saw a dip in the overall quantity initially, and now that's starting to rise again, but in a different manner. Partly that's the spring, and I'm sure probably the same in fire. We start to get busier as the weather gets warmer, and people come out from hibernation and those type of things. But now the calls are maybe have a COVID inclination to them, for example. Currently, the town of Orangeville doesn't have a bylaw with regard to social distancing. Some communities have done that, and there's not a legislative authority at this point. So what that means is that the calls that we've got from the public saying, so-and-so aren't social distancing, we attend and we educate, but there's not an authority to issue a ticket. Now, luckily, I'd say, other than the very rare exception here, we haven't had to. That education, that bringing that knowledge forward, and we get the right response. And again, those are our average citizens that are trying to be healthy, trying to do better for their neighbors. And so the compliance has been just phenomenal. And now we're starting to see some other changes to that. And I don't want to get too academic, and I can certainly go that route, but as we see some of the economic impacts, that will also drive some of our regular type of calls too. And hopefully that won't be for a while yet, but you'll start to see some of those behaviors. We're going to do our best to stay on top of that and keep our community safe. So we've done some other measures. You'll see some different things too. I think most of the town is aware our front doors are closed to administrative type of tasks. If you are a victim in need or it's an emergency situation, clearly our doors are always open. And we have a front vestibule you can get in for a place of safety, and then we'll get you into the station and deal with that accordingly. So as an emergency response, we do our business. It has continued, and it will continue throughout this. But you're right in the sense that, again, that you touched on the PPE. If we talk emergency services, our personal protection equipment, you will see officers with gloves and masks and goggles on most calls now. What we learned very early on is that even though it may seem like a very innocent call, there was a risk to exposure. We had a couple of close calls, and that was a good lesson for us that you might be surprised. So it may be a motor vehicle collision, but you're not aware necessarily, or may have been surprised by somebody that could be exposed. So have that personal equipment on, and that's becoming our new norm every day, which is good. It's protecting that, and that equipment protects the people we're dealing with as much as it does our own staff. So we have seen some advantages of that, and that's becoming our new norm. Getting used to it, and supplies have kept it very well. We're managing well. Support from the province has been very positive. Other than that, the call volume, as I touched on, is starting to increase, but it's still quite manageable. We've done some staffing. We've maneuvered our staff such that we're trying to minimize their exposure, yet still providing the core services, and that's been working effectively. And these are short term, and again, I'd like to thank our staff actually as well to be very flexible. And these are challenging times, and my answer today might change tomorrow on a staffing question, but we're going to figure it out together. And I'd like to say the support's been phenomenal. So that touched a number of topics. I hope that answers some. And
so, if you had some advice for the community we're hearing kind of we're all in this together.
Yes.
And I think there's some anxiety and some stress, and that sometimes brings on, actions that people shouldn't be doing. But you have just a message to the community, what you'd like everybody to try and remember?
First off, the government advice coming from our doctors or scientists, you got to follow it. I do it. We all do it. And I'm glad to see, again, the majority of the population is really online. So if you're not sure, please ask the questions, use the resources, go online, make the phone calls. We're happy, and we would much rather educate and help that. The equipment there is available out there. I appreciate the grocery stores, but practicing that social distancing is probably your best effort. Yeah. Right, doing that. And even I was at Sobeys yesterday, and just popping in that, they're separating their clients. So they're going beyond what the legislation is, and I think our business owners are being very responsible. So one point, please follow what the health professionals are doing. If you don't need to be out, please don't be out. I think Deputy Mayor mentioned about having your groceries ordered online or buy for your neighbors. I mean, all just good things, right? And I think at the core, we're all generally good people, and you want to look after each other. And if you can do that, why not? For those of us that are at risk, I'm sure you got family members or neighbors that will do that shopping for you. And again, when you have any concerns, or please call us. We're happy to, from an emergency services end, that's our core responsibility. You will get an officer or officers as you need in a very timely manner here. We have that, luckily in our community, those service levels very, very high, and we continue to provide that.
You mentioned about bylaw enforcement, and I'm going to throw this over to our town clerk. What are your thoughts? Should we be putting some emergency measures in place through town council about a social distancing bylaw?
I think it's certainly worthy of discussion. I do know that Brampton and Toronto, for example, have gone that route. Mm-hmm. At least from what I'm seeing in the news and through the policing circles, Toronto took a little longer to embrace some of the advice given by health professionals and government. I don't see that necessarily in Orangeville, but having said that, as a police officer, I like a legislation to govern my conduct and what we do. That makes it simpler direction for staff. So I'd like to do some more research, and certainly would buy in from our clerk's office and the CAO to bring you some information to make a decision on it.
Right. So Karen, what are your thoughts on this? And is this something you think? Obviously, there's other municipalities that have gone ahead with this. Is this something we should be doing?
I think it's something that we should consider, just like Dave has indicated. I have to say that both Chris and Carrie, in terms of being out there in the community, have said exactly what Dave has just mentioned in terms of the Orangeville residents and businesses have been extremely cooperative, and for the most part are complying with the emergency orders that have been issued by the province. So I think it's something worth looking at, Mr. Mayor, and certainly we will work closely with the police and looking at and reviewing in terms of looking at the complaints, the nature of the complaints, and the activity that's taking place in the community. I have to say, both Chris and Carrie, and I know the police have said that we've been we're very fortunate that the residents and businesses in Orangeville are taking this very seriously and doing their best to comply with the orders that have been issued. I know that we've received positive feedback from the businesses that we've dealt with, where we've received some complaints or some concerns and have had great cooperation from those businesses. So definitely worth looking at and evaluating and making a determination on whether it's a step that we should take in the future.
Right. I guess, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, my concern is the warm weather, and are we going to see an uptick in sort of unlawful gatherings as a result of it? And I say unlawful, I mean, we're getting direction from the province about these things, but if we don't have a way for our bylaw and our law enforcement people to, what are your thoughts about that, Deputy Mayor?
Well, actually, I was going to ask Dave a question in regards to that. Is what can this council do to help you folks? Is there anything we can do? The bylaw absolutely is one that we could do to help you. Is there anything else that you need from us as far as legislation, equipment, anything?
We're doing quite well, and thank you for that offer. As I mentioned earlier, I might say thank you today, but tomorrow it's yes, we need to take up on it.
Mm-hmm.
We do have one authority right now, which we have been using, and it hasn't been prevalent. So I knock on wood by saying this, the parks were closed and the schools are closed. Those are clearly the larger gathering areas where the kids would play basketball as a weather. With that, we have an authority provincially, it's trespassing, very simply. So we can do that. The bylaw for social distancing, I'm trying to think about the scenarios where there would be gathering that wouldn't be covered by the trespassing, the public parks or the schools, where we will need to employ that. To the mayor's earlier point, when the weather yes, and I'm trying to predict, or we're trying to work out where the need's going to be. I'm not sure just yet. I'm going to learn, I'm sure. But right now, I think we're in a pretty good state. As Karen touched on as well, the compliance here is very high. So I'm hoping it's going to stay there, Root. The bylaw now in a week from now, we might need to be all over this. So I'd like to do the research. Let's get ahead of the game, Karen, and my advice and CEO that we prep this, we have it ready for you. And then it might be a different discussion in a week from now.
Right, right. Well, we do have a council meeting coming up on the next Monday, so I think we'll have to have a discussion during that meeting about these things. We're just about out of time here. I just want to kind of go over one more time. We're the council, I know, and all of the staff are trying to support our frontline healthcare workers. We didn't know that our seniors' homes and our long-term care facilities were going to be the battleground for this early on, but it certainly has become that. And so our hats off to all those people that are doing those jobs in very difficult, trying circumstances. So, and of course, thanks to all of our first responders for everything that they're doing. It's a very unusual and difficult time. I want to go around the horn here. What are your projections for when we might be able to get out of this? I mean, and that's a loaded question, but Andy, what are you thinking? Based on what we're hearing, I know it seems like in Dufferin County, from the numbers, that this seems to be flattening right now. Now, I hope that's the case, which means that as Sergeant McLagan and Madam Clerk have said, Orangeville seems to be listening. We seem to be paying attention to the leaders at the provincial and federal level and our public health and our medical experts, and staying home. And that's the way to stop the spread of this disease. But what are your thoughts? Can you put your crystal ball, in play here?
Well, that is a very loaded question.
Mm-hmm.
If you'd have asked me a month ago, I would have said, "Oh, this should last about a month." So, so much for my estimate. I would hope best case scenario another month. We need to flatten the curve. To keep talking about that, and that's really what we've got to do. I don't think we'll ever go back to being the same. There's going to be things that aren't done the same way, good or bad. But I can just see this changing us for a long time.
Yeah. Well, and also the equipment. We've heard that in Italy that the healthcare system was overrun by cases to the point where they didn't have the necessary ventilator equipment. And I know that multiple levels of government in many, many countries are working hard to increase production of this very important medical equipment, so that we can deal with a spike or in the cases, in the critical care cases. And of course, the PPE, it seems to be, we're hearing lots of good news about PPE production going up, and that it's becoming readily available now to those who need it most. There are people that are suggesting anybody going outside should have a mask on now, and I know, I don't as I go out right now, but I'm seriously thinking about it, that may be something that we need to do to make sure that there's no transmission of this going forward until we can say that it's gone. which looks like it's going to be some months now before that happens. But Karen, what are your thoughts about where we're going with this, and will we be able to get back to, the economy is really taking a huge hit right now. The economists are saying it's the worst since the 1930s, the Depression era. So where do you think we're going with this, Karen? What's your
Well,
guess?
Mr. Mayor, I was actually hoping you were going to go to me last so that I could have a better informed decision based on who went before me. But I think we're probably going to be well into June before we see a return to work in a phased approach in terms of return to work physically being in those spaces. But I couldn't agree with you more that it is having a definite impacts all around. I guess if I could just say one thing, I think it's just more important now than ever for all of us just to be patient and support one another, because these are difficult times. And I think, as Deputy Mayor McIntosh indicated, I think things aren't going to be what they were before.
Right. Sergeant McLagan, what are your thoughts on this? And I know Orangeville Police Service will be ready, whatever happens, but what are your personal thoughts about where we're going with this?
Well, I'd like to thank Karen for her answer and build on that. So
very good.
I thought June as well. And actually, I'd read a study on Singapore and the way that they were able to get back to work and get back to business. And it was the supply started to meet, and culturally they accepted wearing masks everywhere so that they could still use mass transit and basically get back to work. I think probably June is a safe bet. And the new norm will be probably masks in most places. I'm sure from a call perspective, we'll wear those masks probably right into the fall. But if we can get kids back to school and get our economy going again, and we'll persevere. We've seen that already, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that. Yeah. We have an amazing ability, and historically, you mentioned the Great Depression. You think of the wartime periods. Our other generations got through it. I'm sure we can as well. We've got huge technological advances, science advances since then, and we'll get through it.
And I think from all indications, Canada is strong financially, and we're one country that's got the will, the determination, and the financial wherewithal to get through this. And I know our federal and provincial governments, they're going to be dipping into their pockets, deeply to help us. I don't know what that means for taxation down the road, but I know the financial ability of our provincial and federal governments is great. And as long as everybody's got a roof over their head and food in their belly, we'll be able to get through this. And the stress and anxiety of it, I hope everybody can just, chill and be as calm as they can. I think we're going to come out of this just fine, and I hope it's sooner than later. I want to wish all of you joining me today. Thank you very much for your time, and wish you and your families safety and health going forward. And looking forward to meeting you all again in person in the near future. So, and that's a wrap for today's coffee chat. Thank you for joining us, and all the best, everyone.